Close your eyes. And let's drift back to the flickering little stage inside your skull, the one where your mind shines its spotlight, and everything outside that narrow beam just falls into darkness. You think you see the whole picture, but no, you're just gazing at whatever your brain decides is worth noticing. It's like sitting front row at a magic show, where the trick isn't sleight of hand, it's sleight of attention. You probably never realized how many truths you step past in a single day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin with the feeling that you're awake, alert, observant, yet your gaze, your hearing, your awareness, everything is filtered. Think of walking through a crowded street. You don't register the hundreds of tiny details. The shape of a loose thread on someone's jacket, the soft scrape of a pigeon's feet against the pavement, the faint smell of rain settling on warm concrete. Instead, your brain trims the edges. It chooses what matters to your immediate survival, cars, voices, sudden movement, and discards the rest. That's selective attention. A blessing, sure, because without it, you drown in details. But it's also a gentle lie. It makes you think you're perceiving reality as it is, when really you're perceiving a tiny slice of it. Mainstream psychology calls this the spotlight of attention, and researchers can even track it with brain scans. It's real. But here's the quirkier bit. Even when you think you're paying attention, you're missing entire chunks of what's right in front of you. There's a famous experiment where people watched a video of basketball players passing a ball. They were told to count the passes. Half the viewers completely missed a person in a gorilla suit strolling through the middle of the scene. A whole gorilla. Invisible. Not because it wasn't there, but because the spotlight didn't shine on it. You might laugh thinking, I'd notice that. But would you? Your brain edits out more than you'd ever like to admit. And scientists still argue whether this filtering is a flaw or an adaptation. Is it protecting you from overload? Or is it quietly robbing you of the raw, uncut version of existence? There's no neat answer. You might even argue you've never experienced the full, unfiltered truth. Not once. Think about your phone. It buzzes with a new message, and suddenly the room feels sharper. The colors, the shapes, they're all there, but you didn't really see them until that vibration anchored you. Just like how you didn't notice the hum of the refrigerator until I mentioned it right now. That's how selective your spotlight is. It leaves whole universes unlit. And here's the kicker. This narrowing isn't just about what you see. It's emotional too. When you're anxious, you notice threats. When you're in love, you notice sweetness. Your spotlight isn't neutral. It's tinted by your mood. Ever reread an old message and feel it has a completely different tone depending on your day? Yeah. The message didn't change. You did. You could imagine your brain as a lazy curator in an overcrowded museum. It decides which paintings to hang in the main gallery and hides the rest in storage. Most of the time, you don't even know what's missing, which makes you wonder, how much of your life is invisible simply because it didn't feel urgent at the time? Now think of the last time you argued with someone. You were sure you heard exactly what they said, but later, when someone else repeated it back, it was slightly off. Maybe you even insisted you were right. Maybe you still believe it. That's selective attention at play. It focuses so hard on what feels relevant, your feelings, your point of view, that the rest dissolves. There's also a softer version of this trick. You don't just miss things. You fail to notice how much you're missing. That's the real magic. Your brain doesn't flash a warning like, hey, big gaps here. It just serves up a seamless illusion of this is reality. You feel confident because you don't see the black edges outside the spotlight beam. Here's a little fringe tidbit for you. Some researchers tested professional airplane pilots on this attention blindness. Even they, trained for hyper-awareness, missed critical visual cues when told to focus on a secondary task. That means even the sharpest, most disciplined minds can't escape the beam's limits. No one can see it all. And yet, isn't there a strange comfort in that? If your mind filtered less, you'd probably go mad with overload. Imagine noticing every shadow, every flicker of light, every tiny sound all at once. You couldn't even fall asleep. The spotlight spares you. It hides the world's endless background noise so you can keep moving. But the lie lingers. You think you're fully awake, when really, you're moving through a carefully edited highlight reel. It's like reading a novel where half the chapters are missing, and somehow still feeling like you got the whole story. So tonight, as you drift a little deeper into this quiet moment, notice how even your awareness of your awareness is slippery. Maybe you'll remember this tomorrow, or maybe it'll just dissolve like a dream you can't quite retell. But for now, feel the edges of that spotlight. Soft, warm, and narrow, leaving just enough mystery in the dark corners to keep you curious. And as you sink a little deeper into this thought, you can already feel the next whisper coming about how memory itself isn't what you think it is. You're still drifting, and now the edges of your thoughts soften into something slipperier. Memory. You trust it, don't you? You lean on it like a familiar old chair, believing it will hold you. But your memories are tricksters. They are not still photographs. They're more like paintings that get retouched every time you glance at them. The brushstrokes shifting with your mood, your bias, your passing whims. And you tell yourself, no, not me. I remember things clearly. Of course you do. Everyone thinks that. But every time you recall a moment, you're not actually pulling it from some perfect archive. You're reconstructing it. You're remixing it with the person you are right now. And that new version overwrites the old one like a digital file saved again and again. Picture it. You're at a dinner with friends. 5 years later, you swear the waiter was wearing a red shirt. Someone else says it was blue. You argue. But what if neither of you is right? What if your brain simply filled in a color because your neurons don't like leaving blanks? They crave completion. Mainstream research calls this memory reconsolidation. It's the idea that each memory is fluid, never fixed, like a Word document always open for edits. And here's a fun, slightly unsettling tidbit. Scientists once implanted false memories in lab subjects by just suggesting details, a few subtle nudges, and suddenly a person swears they met Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. Completely impossible, but it feels real. Their faces even light up with nostalgia when they describe it. Your brain would rather invent a cohesive lie than leave a hole. And scientists still argue whether there's any such thing as a pure memory, untouched by later influence. Some say early childhood memories are especially suspect because they've been retold so many times they're basically stories about stories. Do you remember that birthday party at age 3? Or do you just remember the photos? Think of how this plays out in your daily life. You recall a conversation with someone, but your brain quietly edits out the parts that made you look bad. A friend reminds you later, and you say, "That's not how it happened." You're both sincere. You're both wrong. And it gets even more slippery. Memory doesn't just record facts. It laces them with emotion. Try remembering a moment you were humiliated. Feel that heat in your chest. That's your body reliving it, not just recalling it. Meanwhile, something you once loved might feel bland in hindsight, like an old photo that's lost its color. Your emotional filter is never the same twice. It's like your brain is running a tiny theater. Every time you remember, the actors come back on stage. But the set designer has changed. The costumes are updated. The lighting is different. And sometimes a completely new character wanders in. Yet you still believe it's the same play. Want a quirky fact? In some rare cases, people have highly superior autobiographical memory, meaning they can recall almost every day of their lives in ridiculous detail. You'd think that's a blessing. It isn't. They describe it as exhausting, like living with an endless slideshow they can't turn off. They still make errors too, because even the most perfect recall is shaped by interpretation. Have you ever noticed how siblings can remember the same childhood completely differently? One thinks the house was filled with laughter. The other remembers tension and silence. Both memories are true, for them. That's the trick. Your memory doesn't preserve the truth. It preserves your truth. There's a classic fringe debate about whether memories are more like books in a library or chalkboards that keep getting erased and rewritten. You'd like to believe there's some original version stored safely away, but each time you open it, you smudge it. There's no pristine copy waiting to be found. So next time you swear you know how it happened, imagine your brain as a slightly unreliable narrator, someone with good intentions but a knack for embellishment. It doesn't mean you're lying. It means you're human. Think about your dreams. They're vivid when you wake, but by the time you tell someone, details vanish, replaced with fragments that feel plausible. Memories behave like that too, quietly morphing into smoother, easier versions of themselves. It's like nature's way of keeping you sane. Too much sharpness would overwhelm you. And isn't that strangely kind? Your brain gently erases the edges of pain, softens heartbreak, reshapes the awkwardness of past mistakes. Without that blur, you'd be carrying every cringeworthy moment in unbearable detail. Maybe memory's lies are a mercy. But of course, the mercy can backfire. You forget the exact words someone said in anger, but the feeling remains like a ghost. You think you've let it go, but it surfaces later in ways you can't quite explain. Memory is emotional glue. Even when it's inaccurate, it sticks. As you drift deeper into this thought, feel how it changes your trust in yourself just a little. The things you hold dear, the things you swear by, are they really yours? Or are they rewrites of rewrites? Maybe even now, you're reshaping this very moment, tucking it into a corner of your mind that will look different tomorrow. And as you settle into that soft uncertainty, the next quiet lie waits just beyond, the way your brain makes you feel so sure about things you don't really know. You're still floating, deeper now, and here comes that peculiar warmth of certainty. You know that feeling. You're sure you're right about something. It feels solid, like a locked door that no one can open. You've probably argued with someone, felt your voice steady with conviction, thinking, I know this, I just know it. But here's the quiet betrayal. Your brain often confuses confidence with accuracy. They're not the same thing. You felt it before, being absolutely certain you left your keys on the counter until you find them later in your bag. That tiny drop in your stomach, that's the moment your mind admits, sheepishly, that certainty was just a feeling, not a fact. But most of the time, you never get that moment. You just walk around believing your convictions are as sturdy as stone. There's even a name for this: the illusion of explanatory depth. It's that sneaky gap between what you think you understand and what you actually understand. Like when someone asks how a zipper works, or a toilet flushes, or even how clouds form, and suddenly you realize your knowledge is just a vague sketch. You don't know the full mechanism, you just thought you did. Here's a mainstream fact to keep you humble. When researchers asked people how well they understood everyday objects, bicycles, ballpoint pens, they gave high confidence ratings. Then they were asked to draw a diagram explaining it. Most couldn't. The illusion popped instantly. And this isn't about intelligence. It's about how the brain loves shortcuts. If it feels familiar, it feels true. Want a quirky example? In one study, people were shown nonsense financial charts, told they represented real stock data, and asked to explain them. They spoke with such confidence, using phrases like clear upward trend and predictable volatility, even though the charts were just random noise. That's how hungry your mind is to appear certain. And scientists still argue whether this certainty bias evolved for survival. Maybe our ancestors needed to sound sure. Hesitation could look weak, could cost them status or trust in the tribe. Or maybe it's just an accidental side effect of how neural pathways lock in. Either way, your brain loves to fake clarity. You can feel it in daily life. Think of how confidently you can say someone's lying based on a vibe, or how sure you are that you're good at reading people. Even though, statistically, humans are awful lie detectors. We're barely above random guessing. Yet that gut level I know feeling is so persuasive, it overrides doubt. This illusion even shapes your sense of time. You're convinced you'll remember that brilliant idea you just had, so you don't write it down. Hours later, it's gone. Or you feel sure you have plenty of time before a deadline, only to watch it sneak up. Your confidence betrays you quietly, again and again. And it isn't always gentle. Consider eyewitness testimony. People testify in court with absolute conviction, describing someone's face, someone's car. Yet wrongful convictions are packed with these confident but wrong memories. Entire lives reshaped because someone felt so sure. Confidence isn't evidence, it's just a sensation. Want to feel the weirdness of it? Try this tiny exercise in your mind. Imagine the back of a US penny. Can you picture what's written there? Most Americans think they can until they try. The words blur, the details vanish. Yet you've seen it thousands of times. Your brain skips the detail and gives you the illusion of knowing. Even your opinions work this way. Think about something you believe strongly, like a political stance or a personal value. If I asked you to explain it step by step, down to its roots, could you? Or would you find yourself circling vague phrases like, because it just makes sense? That's the confidence illusion whispering again. And here's the softer, almost funny side. You're not the only one. Everyone around you is doing the same thing. That coworker who sounds so authoritative, probably just as foggy inside. That relative who argues at dinner like they have all the facts. They're leaning on the same shaky scaffolding of half-knowledge dressed up as certainty. There's a strange equality in that, isn't there? A fringe tidbit for you. Some studies show that people who know the least about a topic often feel the most confident. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less you know, the fewer gaps you see, so you feel rock solid. Meanwhile, actual experts see the complexity, the grey areas, the limits of their own understanding, so they sound more hesitant. Ironically, doubt is the mark of someone who really knows. So the next time you feel that rush of, I'm right, pause. Taste it for what it is. A fleeting chemical cocktail, not proof. And maybe laugh at it a little, because if you can see the illusion, it loosens its grip. But of course, your brain won't stop serving you this feeling. It's baked in. You'll still walk into tomorrow feeling sure about things you've never truly examined. You'll still fill in the blanks with confident guesses. And maybe that's okay. After all, total uncertainty would freeze you in place. You need some conviction to move. So as you rest now, notice how the edges of your own certainty soften, just slightly. That locked door in your mind creaks open a little. Behind it waits the next quiet trick. How your brain makes quick mental shortcuts, choosing speed over accuracy, and somehow convinces you that was the smart thing to do. You're gliding further, and now you can feel your brain's lazy little shortcuts kicking in. They're called heuristics, but you might know them better as gut reactions or snap judgments. Your mind uses them all the time, without asking your permission. They're quick, efficient, and often wrong. Yet you barely notice. It's like your brain has an invisible fast food window, handing you pre-packaged answers instead of slow-cooked reasoning. Think about it. Someone asks you which city is larger, San Diego or San Antonio. You don't pull out maps or population data. You just feel like you know. Or you meet someone and instantly decide whether you like them. No detailed analysis, just an impression. That's your mental shortcut humming along, saving energy. Mainstream psychology calls this System 1 thinking, the fast, intuitive mode. It helps you dodge danger, like braking when a shadow moves across the road. It's also why you're prone to ridiculous errors like thinking more expensive wine tastes better, simply because it costs more. Here's a quirky, almost silly tidbit. People will rate a jar of jam as more delicious if they're told it won an award, even if it's the exact same jam as the regular version. The shortcut? Award all good. Your brain loves rules of thumb because they're easy. And scientists still argue whether these shortcuts are mostly adaptive, keeping you alive and functional, or whether they're relics of a past where survival depended on split-second choices, not nuanced thinking. In the modern world, they sometimes misfire spectacularly. Take the availability heuristic. You estimate how common something is based on how easily it comes to mind. Hear about a shark attack on the news, and suddenly the ocean feels more dangerous than it really is. Meanwhile, you forget that car accidents, way more common, barely make headlines. Your brain confuses memorable with likely. Or think about the representativeness heuristic. You meet someone wearing glasses, reading a thick novel, and instantly assume they're bookish. You're not crunching probabilities. You're matching them to a stereotype. It feels like insight, but it's just your brain doing pattern matching on autopilot. Want an even more everyday example? When you're grocery shopping and see a sign that says, limit 12 per customer, you buy more than you would have otherwise. The number anchors your choice. It doesn't even matter what you need. Your brain latches onto the shortcut. 12 is normal. I'll get close to 12. That's not logic. It's bias masquerading as reason. Even the way you judge time is a shortcut. Remember waiting for an elevator. 30 seconds feels like forever when you're bored, but a lively conversation makes minutes vanish. Your brain uses your emotional state as a quick gauge for how much time has passed. It's not clock accurate, it's convenience accurate. And here's the almost poetic part. You often don't notice the shortcut until it collides with reality. Like when you confidently pick the better deal, based on a big red sale sign, then later realize the other brand was cheaper. Or when you instantly trust someone because they remind you of a friend, only to learn they're nothing alike. But maybe you're thinking, okay, shortcuts aren't so bad. They save time. True. But they also feed into bigger illusions. Think about jury trials. Jurors see a defendant in a sharp suit, speaking calmly, and unconsciously shortcut, neatly dressed, as credible. That tiny bias can shape a verdict. Here's a fringe tidbit that feels almost absurd. In one study, parole decisions were influenced by the judge's lunch break. Right before eating, they denied most requests. Right after eating, approval rates shot up. Hunger, not the law, shaped the outcome. That's how vulnerable even serious reasoning is to simple mental shortcuts. It makes you wonder, how many of your own deeply considered choices are just polished up gut reactions? That house you love? Maybe you were hooked by the sunlight in the entryway. That person you didn't hire. Maybe your brain just didn't like their tone of voice. You think you've thought it through, but often you're just rationalizing what your quick-thinking brain already decided. And the funny thing, you rarely question it. Your mind doesn't say, this is just a guess, proceed with caution. No, it says, here's the answer. You're welcome. It even rewards you with a little hit of relief, like scratching an itch. But sometimes shortcuts are comforting. Imagine if you analyzed everything. Should you step left or right? Should you say hello or stay quiet? You'd never move. Heuristics let you glide through life, even if they occasionally steer you into walls. So tonight, as you're lying there, think about the last fast decision you made today. Did you pick your outfit because it was truly the best choice, or because it felt familiar? Did you decide you were too tired for something, or was that just your brain choosing the shortcut of comfort? It's okay to smile at it. These shortcuts are part of what makes you human, softening the edges of a world too complex to process fully. They're like tiny mental cheat codes, imperfect but necessary. And as you drift deeper now, past the quick judgments and lazy guesses, the next subtle lie is waiting. It's softer, more personal. The way your emotions quietly repaint reality itself, making it warmer, colder, brighter, or dimmer without you even realizing. You're drifting further, and now you can feel the quiet hum of your emotions, the soft undercurrent that shapes everything you see. You like to believe you're rational, that you judge the world with clear eyes, but your feelings, they're little artists with paintbrushes, tinting reality without asking your permission. One moment, the room feels cozy and inviting. The next is dull and heavy. The walls didn't move. You did. Picture waking up on a rainy morning. If you're rested and content, the rain feels soothing, romantic even. If you're anxious or sad, the same rain feels oppressive. The sound is identical. It's your emotional filter that changes the story. Your brain doesn't show you an objective world. It shows you a version colored by your current mood. Here's the mainstream truth. Neuroscientists call this affective coloring. Your amygdala, the little almond-shaped hub of emotion, tweaks how you perceive and remember things. Even neutral faces look more hostile if you're in a bad mood. And if you're happy, you might overlook subtle warning signs because everything feels safe. Want a quirky tidbit? In one experiment, people were asked to judge the taste of wine after watching different film clips, some sad, some funny. After a sad clip, they rated the wine as less vibrant. After a funny clip, the exact same wine seemed bright and lively. Your tongue doesn't lie, but your mood tells it what story to believe. And scientists still argue whether this emotional coloring helps you adapt or traps you in bias. Maybe it evolved to help your ancestors survive. When you're scared, it's safer to see danger everywhere. But in modern life, it can trick you into thinking a neutral email sounds cold, or a simple delay from a friend means they're upset with you. You felt this before, haven't you? Think about a text message. If you're feeling insecure, okay, looks like an insult. If you're relaxed, it's just fine. The letters are the same, but the meaning bends to your feelings. It happens with memory too. Remember a vacation you took years ago. If you're content now, you'll recall the sunshine, the laughter. But if you're lonely, you might focus on the awkward parts, the arguments, the boredom between highlights. Your past isn't fixed. It's painted over with the colors of today. And even your sense of time isn't immune. When you're sad or anxious, minutes drag like hours. When you're joyful, hours vanish like minutes. It's not the clock. It's your emotional lens stretching or compressing the experience. Think about this in everyday moments. You come home after a rough day, and the clutter on the table feels unbearable, like chaos closing in. On a good day, you don't even see it. Or you meet someone new. If you're feeling hopeful, they seem charming. If you're cynical, they seem suspicious. Same person. Different internal weather. There's a fringe theory some psychologists play with. Maybe there's no such thing as pure perception. Maybe everything you see is already an emotional construct, a blend of sensory input and how you feel about it. The world as you know it might always be mood-shaped. And here's a strange comfort in that. Because if your emotions can shift how reality feels, then reality can shift simply by shifting you. Change your state, and suddenly the same life feels softer, lighter. No walls need to move. No massive life event needs to happen. It's just your inner lens tilting slightly. Think of those mornings when you woke up inexplicably lighter. Nothing big happened, but the air felt different. The sunlight was the same, but it warmed you more. Or those days when everything felt slightly wrong, even though nothing had gone wrong. That's emotional coloring at its quietest. Here's a funny little story from research. People in one study were asked to list their life satisfaction on a sunny day and a rainy day. The sunny day group rated their lives significantly happier. But when the interviewer casually mentioned the weather first, just pointed it out, the effect vanished. Simply being aware of the emotional lens broke the illusion. So awareness is like wiping the fog off the window. You still see the world through your own mind, but at least you know it's a window, not the sky itself. But your emotions don't stop at perception. They guide your decisions too. When you're scared, you take fewer risks. When you're angry, you misjudge how much force you're using. When you're happy, you say yes to things you'd normally hesitate on. You think you're making choices logically, but your feelings are steering the wheel in subtle, invisible ways. And here's the paradox. You need this emotional coloring. Without it, life would feel flat, meaningless. You wouldn't care about anything. There's a rare neurological condition where people lose emotional processing, and they become frozen by indecision. They can't choose what to eat, where to go. Emotions are the spice that makes any choice feel worth making. So as you rest here, let yourself notice how even this quiet moment is painted by feeling. Maybe there's a touch of calm in your chest. Maybe a trace of curiosity. Maybe the edges of drowsiness are softening the colors around you. That's your lens shifting in real time. And as you slip deeper, beyond the sway of mood and memory, the next lie waits. The way your brain hungers for patterns, even in pure randomness, stitching dots into constellations that were never really there. You're sinking deeper now, into that part of your mind that refuses to leave things alone. It hates randomness. It hates blank spaces. So it makes patterns all the time, even when none exist. Your brain is a storyteller, weaving connections from scraps. It stitches the stars into constellations. It sees faces in clouds. It finds meaning in coincidences that are just coincidences. You felt it, haven't you? The moment you think of someone and they text you 5 seconds later, it feels cosmic, like fate gave you a wink. But statistically, it's just timing. Yet your mind rushes to build a bridge, to say, see, there's a reason. Mainstream psychology calls this apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections in random data. It's why gamblers see hot streaks in dice rolls that are purely random, or why people swear their horoscope nailed their personality. Your brain is hungry for order. It would rather invent a reason than accept that some things have none. Want a quirky tidbit? In one study, researchers played white noise for participants and told them there might be faint songs hidden inside. Many swore they heard words, melodies, patterns emerging from static. Their ears didn't hear it. Their minds created it. And scientists still argue whether this pattern, hunger, is a survival adaptation or a side effect of an overactive brain. Maybe it helped your ancestors spot predators in the bushes or read social cues in a tribe. But now, in a world of information overload, it makes you see signals in pure noise. It's not just in sound or sight. It's in your daily life. Think about when you connect the dots about someone's behavior. 3 small coincidences, and suddenly you're convinced they're hiding something. Or when you see a string of signs that you should or shouldn't do something. You feel guided, but it's just your mind grabbing onto anything that looks like a breadcrumb trail. Even in history, humans can't resist pattern making. Ancient civilizations looked at scattered stars and drew hunters, lions, and mythic beasts across the sky. They created elaborate calendars and omens from celestial motion. The same instinct lives in you. When you see 11:11 on a clock, you pause. You wonder if it means something. Here's a fringe twist. Some researchers think creativity itself is just sophisticated pattern making. Artists, musicians, scientists, they all connect unrelated dots in fresh ways. So the same tendency that makes you see ghosts in the fog also makes you imagine symphonies and invent technology. Pattern hunger is both a glitch and a gift, but it can mislead you badly. Think about conspiracy theories. They thrive on connecting unrelated events into a neat, dramatic narrative. People see hidden hands in politics, secret codes in news articles, master plans in coincidences. It feels satisfying because it replaces chaos with order, even if the order is completely made up, and your brain rewards you for it. When you spot a pattern, you get a little dopamine spark, a tiny rush of aha. It feels like solving a puzzle. That's why you can't stop seeing shapes in wood grain or finding messages in song lyrics. Here's another small everyday trick of this hunger. When you hear someone laugh in a cafe, you think you know why. Maybe you assume they're laughing at you, or you assume they're flirting. Your brain fills in a story without evidence. It hates the void. Even animals do it. Pigeons in experiments will perform strange rituals, like spinning in circles, if they accidentally got food after doing it once. They believe the action caused the reward. It's the same impulse behind your lucky socks, your ritual before an exam or a big meeting. Deep down, you know it's irrational, but it feels safer to pretend there's a pattern. And here's the funny paradox. The world does have patterns, real ones. Day follows night, seasons shift, gravity pulls. But the real patterns are sometimes boring or hidden, while the false ones feel vivid and exciting. So your brain latches onto the ones that feel meaningful, even if they're hollow. Think of when you replay a conversation in your mind, searching for clues you missed. Or when you scan social media for hints about someone's feelings. Often, you're just drawing constellations between unrelated stars. But it soothes you. It makes you feel like you're decoding life. Want one more strange tidbit? Chess masters, people who study real, complex patterns, still sometimes see phantom threats on a board. Their minds trick them into defending against moves that don't exist. Even expertise doesn't silence the pattern-making impulse. So next time you catch yourself whispering, "What are the odds?" or "This can't be a coincidence," pause. Smile at how deeply wired it is to seek order. Your brain is just trying to make the universe less scary, less empty, even if it has to invent a story to do it. And maybe that's okay. Without that instinct, you wouldn't have art, or science, or bedtime stories like this one. You wouldn't look at the stars and feel awe. You wouldn't feel connected to anything at all. So as you lie here, imagine those countless patterns flickering softly in your mind. Some real, some imagined, all harmless as they fade. And in that gentle fading, another lie waits, the one where you think your thoughts are your own, untouched by the whispers of the people around you. You're gliding even deeper now, and the air feels heavier with something you can't quite name, because this next lie isn't about the world at all. It's about you, or rather, the you that thinks it's independent. You like to believe your thoughts are yours alone, born from your unique mind, but they're not. They're echoes. They're ripples shaped by the voices, glances, and invisible nudges of the people around you. You're not a solitary thinker. You're a social sponge. Think about the last opinion you formed. Maybe about a movie, a politician, a gadget. Did you really come to that conclusion alone? Or did a friend's excitement steer you? Did an online comment plant the seed? Did you feel more certain just because more people seem to agree? Mainstream psychology calls this social conformity, and it's baked so deeply into your brain that you don't even feel it happening. In a classic experiment, people were asked to match the length of lines on a card. The answer was obvious. But when everyone else in the room gave the wrong answer, most participants went along, even though their eyes told them otherwise. Their brains bent toward the group, quietly whispering, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm wrong." Want a quirky tidbit? There's a phenomenon called the bandwagon effect, where even fake popularity creates real persuasion. Show someone a product with 4,000 five-star reviews, and they'll rate it higher, even if the reviews are fabricated. You trust the crowd because, on some ancient level, being with the group meant survival. And scientists still argue whether this is a flaw or a feature. Maybe you're wired to adopt the tribe's views because it made cooperation easier. But in modern life, it makes you think your preferences are self-chosen, when they're just borrowed. You feel it in subtle ways. When you're in a room full of people laughing, you laugh more. When you're around anxious people, you feel tense without knowing why. Emotional states spread like a quiet contagion, shaping your mood and with it, your decisions. Think about social media. You scroll, you see what's trending, and suddenly it feels more important. Not because it objectively is, but because others care. You're anchored by their attention. And when you like something, it's partly a signal back to them. I belong to this group. It's not always obvious, You might buy a certain jacket because you like the style. But why do you like it? Because you saw it on someone admired? Because it's common in your social circle? Even your sense of beauty and taste is a choir, not a solo. And it goes even deeper. In conversation, you unconsciously mirror people's gestures, their tone, even their facial expressions. It's called the chameleon effect. Your brain does it automatically because similarity makes people trust you more. You blend without realizing it. Here's a fringe detail that feels eerie. Researchers have found that when people make decisions in a group, their brainwaves can actually sync. Literally. Neural patterns start aligning as if the group is sharing one quiet rhythm. So when you say, "I just felt we were all on the same page," it's not just a metaphor. But it isn't all manipulation. This social echoing also builds connection. It helps you feel less alone. It lets you absorb kindness, humor, and wisdom from others. Without it, you'd be an island, cut off from the warmth of shared thought. Still, the lie remains. You sit with a belief and think, "This is mine." But if you trace it back, you'd find fingerprints all over it. Family, friends, culture, strangers. Like a well-worn stone passed hand to hand until it ended up in your pocket. Even rebellion is borrowed. When you reject one group's ideas, you're usually adopting another group's. You're still echoing, just with a different crowd. Want another curious tidbit? People who think they're the most immune to social influence are often the most affected. In one study, self-proclaimed independent thinkers conformed to group opinions at the same rate as everyone else. They just remembered it differently. Their brains rewrote the story so they'd still feel autonomous. So what does that mean for you? It means your inner monologue is more like a conversation than you realized. The words you use, the judgments you make, even the way you imagine normal are stitched from countless other voices. But there's a strange comfort in that too. It means you're not alone in your thoughts. You're part of a larger weave, a shared human network that keeps spinning even when you're silent. And as you rest here, you can feel that network fading softly into the background. You can imagine those faint echoes settling like dust, leaving the illusion of quiet independence. But just as you start to feel alone with your mind again, another lie steps forward. The one where you imagine you can see the future clearly, even though it's made of fog. You're floating further now, into that hazy part of your mind that loves to pretend it knows what's coming. You make little predictions all day long without even thinking about it. How the traffic will flow, how someone will react, how tomorrow will feel. And it gives you this warm illusion of control. But the truth, the future is fog, and your brain is just scribbling rough guesses on the mist. You felt it, haven't you? You look at the sky and say, "It's probably going to rain later." Or you glance at a text and think, "I know exactly what they mean by this tone." Then reality unfolds, and it doesn't match your forecast. But your brain doesn't stop guessing. It can't. There's a mainstream fact tucked here. Neuroscientists say your brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly simulating what's about to happen so you can react faster. It even predicts what you're about to see a fraction of a second before your eyes actually deliver the image. That's why you're startled when something unexpected happens. Your brain had already loaded a different version of reality. Want a quirky tidbit? People who are asked to estimate how long a task will take almost always underestimate. This is called the planning fallacy. You assume you'll have more time, more focus, fewer interruptions. You picture the smoothest possible path. But life rarely moves that cleanly, does it? And scientists still argue whether this constant future guessing is more helpful than harmful. On one hand, it keeps you prepared. On the other, it feeds anxiety. Your brain rehearsing dozens of scenarios, most of which will never come true. You notice it in small ways. Waiting for a package, you feel like you know when it will arrive. Preparing for a conversation, you rehearse what the other person might say. Your brain can't leave the blank space alone. It has to fill it. And sometimes the guesses feel so vivid, they blur into memory later. Did you actually experience that event? Or just imagine it so clearly it left a trace? Think about your calendar. You look ahead and picture how next week will unfold. But reality never fits the outline. People cancel, weather shifts, your mood changes, yet you keep making those mental maps because uncertainty feels unbearable without at least a sketch of what's coming. It happens with people too. You meet someone once and just know how they'll act in the future. Sometimes you're right, but often you're bending them to fit a storyline you wrote too soon. Or you look at a child and predict what they'll become, as if life is a straight road you can already see to the end. And here's the wild part. Your predictions can actually shape reality, at least a little. If you expect someone to be kind, you treat them warmly, and they're more likely to respond kindly. If you expect hostility, your tension invites it. Psychologists call this a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your brain's guesses ripple outward, nudging the world toward the story you expect. But most of the time, your future visions are just comforting fictions. Remember how sure you were, years ago, about what your life would look like now? Did it turn out that way? Probably not exactly. Yet here you are, alive anyway, adapting to what you didn't see coming. Here's a fringe tidbit. In brain imaging studies, the same regions activate when you imagine the future and when you recall the past. It's like your brain uses the same neural movie set for both, which means the future you picture is just a remix of past experiences. You can't imagine something truly unknown. You're just rearranging what you already know. And still, the guessing keeps you moving. If you didn't believe tomorrow could be a little better, a little clearer, you might never take the next step. Your mind gives you just enough illusion of foresight to keep you curious, hopeful. Think about those moments when you say, I have a feeling this is going to work out, or I just know today's going to be bad. It's your brain projecting a mood onto the blank page ahead. But the truth is, you're never as right or as wrong as you fear. The fog stays, no matter how hard you squint. And even when the future surprises you, your mind rushes in afterward to rewrite the story. It says, I knew it all along, even if you didn't. Psychologists call this hindsight bias. It's your brain smoothing the edges, pretending the unpredictable was obvious. So here you are, lying quietly, imagining what tomorrow might bring, even as you know it's a fragile sketch. The real future is still forming, somewhere beyond your reach. And maybe that's the soft beauty of it. You can never truly spoil the ending. Let that thought settle like a feather, because just past this fog of false foresight waits another trick. How a single number, a single suggestion, can anchor your mind and quietly steer every choice that follows without you even noticing the tug. You're slipping deeper now, and it's time to notice how your mind can be quietly hijacked by something so small, so trivial, that you wouldn't believe it if you weren't living it. It's called anchoring. One number, one idea, one tiny reference point lodges itself in your head, and suddenly everything else you think or decide drifts around it, like a planet caught in someone else's gravity. Picture walking into a store. You see a sweater with a $200 price tag. Too much, you think. Then you spot another one for $80, and it feels reasonable. even cheap by comparison. But if you had seen the $80 sweater first, it would have felt expensive. The sweater didn't change. Your anchor did. Mainstream psychology shows this again and again. Give someone a random number before asking them a question, and their answer shifts toward that number, even if it's absurd. In one experiment, people spun a wheel rigged to land on either 10 or 65. Then they guessed how many African countries are in the United Nations. Those who saw 10 guessed much lower than those who saw 65. A fake wheel spun their reality. Want a quirky tidbit? Real estate agents, professionals who should know better, are also swayed by anchoring. Show them a high suggested price for a house, and they'll appraise it higher than if you gave them a lower starting number. Even experts can't escape the pool. And scientists still argue whether anchoring is just a cognitive shortcut, like we talked about before, or whether it's deeper, a built-in flaw of the way your brain encodes information. Either way, it's not just about numbers. It's about any first impression that sticks. Think about meeting someone new. The very first thing you notice, maybe their clothes, their tone, their handshake, becomes the anchor. Every later detail is interpreted through it. If the first vibe is warm, you'll forgive small flaws. If it's cold, you'll see everything they do as suspicious. One initial moment quietly shapes the entire relationship. Or think about your self-image. Maybe someone called you shy when you were young, and that label anchored itself so deeply you still carry it. Even years later, with more confidence, that old anchor tugs at you, whispering, "You're not really outgoing. You're pretending." Anchoring even distorts your sense of time. Start a day with one bad event, and it colors everything that follows. Start it with one tiny win, a compliment, a good cup of coffee, and you feel buoyed for hours. The first thing becomes the measuring stick for the rest. And here's the strange part. You don't notice it happening. Anchoring doesn't announce itself. You feel like you're making a fresh, independent judgment, not realizing the frame was already set. It gets even sneakier. Say you're negotiating a salary. The first number someone mentions, high or low, sets the entire range for what feels reasonable. Even if you know it's arbitrary, it still warps your sense of what's fair. Your brain doesn't have a built-in calculator for true value. It just orbits the first thing it hears. There's a fringe theory that anchoring is connected to the way memory works. Your brain likes reference points because they're efficient. Without them, you'd have to start from scratch every time. So it grabs the first number, the first idea, and uses it as scaffolding. But that scaffolding becomes a cage when it's wrong. Even everyday language can anchor you. If someone says, "This will take just a minute," you expect it to be quick. If they say, "This might take a while," you settle in. The words set the pace before the reality even unfolds. And it's not always malicious. Your brain likes anchors because they make the world feel less uncertain. Without them, every choice would feel like floating in open water with no landmarks. Anchors are little illusions of stability, but they can hold you back too. Think about your ambitions. If you anchor your expectations to what your peers are doing, you might never aim beyond their horizon. Or if you anchor to one early failure, you might stop yourself from trying again. Want a small personal experiment? Tomorrow, notice the first thing that catches your attention in any situation. A price, a face, a word. Then watch how every later thought subtly drifts around it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And yet, even if you catch it, you can't always escape it. That's the quiet power of an anchor. It keeps tugging. But maybe that's not all bad. Sometimes the right anchor, the right initial spark, can ground you in a storm. So as you rest here, imagine those little anchors scattered through your life, some heavy, some light. And as you let them go for now, you'll drift toward the next gentle lie, the one where your brain edits your personal story, just enough to make you look a little better than the messy truth. You're drifting even softer now, and the next lie is the most personal. It's the story you tell about yourself. You think it's honest, you think it's whole, but it isn't. It's a curated highlight reel, a narrative your brain quietly edits so you can live with yourself. A little cleaner, a little kinder, a little more flattering than the raw footage. You know this feeling, even if you don't say it out loud. You tell someone about a past mistake, but you frame it just slightly in your favor. You forgot a detail that would make you look careless. You emphasize the part where you learned something, grew, redeemed yourself. It's not exactly a lie. It's more like soft retouching. Mainstream psychology calls this the self-serving bias. It's your brain's way of protecting your self-esteem. When something goes well, you take credit. I worked hard for this. When something fails, you blame circumstances. It wasn't fair. It was out of my control. It keeps you from drowning in guilt or doubt. Want a quirky tidbit? In one study, couples were asked what percentage of household chores they each did. When you added up both partners' answers, it often came to more than 100%. Why? Each person remembered their own efforts more vividly than the others. It felt like they were doing more, even when they weren't. And scientists still argue whether this gentle self-deception is harmful or helpful. Some say it keeps you motivated, giving you just enough confidence to keep moving. Others say it blinds you to your blind spots, keeping you from growing beyond your flaws. It happens all the time. Think about the last argument you had. You probably remember all the points you made clearly, the moments you stayed calm, but you blur out the parts where your tone got sharp or where you dismissed someone too quickly. In your version, you were reasonable. In theirs, maybe not so much. Or consider your achievements. You tell the story of how you earned that promotion, but you might downplay the lucky timing, the mentor who opened a door, the market conditions that helped. You're not lying. You're just simplifying the narrative so it feels coherent. And you do it with your past too. You remember childhood in soft focus, even if it wasn't all kind. Or you exaggerate the hardships to explain your resilience. Your brain reshapes the old chapters so the present you feels justified. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some neuroscientists believe your sense of a continuous self is itself a fabrication. Each moment, your brain stitches together memory fragments and current feelings into a seamless story. But there's no stable narrator, just a rolling patchwork that feels like you. And yet, without this editing, life would feel unbearable. Imagine if you remembered everything you ever said wrong, every moment you failed someone. If you didn't smooth the edges, you'd drown in the weight of it. Self-serving stories are like mental insulation. They keep the temperature livable, but they also make you resistant to certain truths. It's why you're quicker to notice others' flaws than your own. Why you feel misunderstood when someone points out a pattern you don't want to see. Your brain protects its carefully edited story at all costs. It even shows up in small things. Think of how you explain being late. Traffic was terrible, you say, forgetting you could have left earlier. Or how you describe a failed project. The team didn't deliver, you say, skimming over the parts you controlled. You're not trying to deceive. It's just the way the story naturally arranges itself in your mind. Even your social media self is a mirror of this. You post the good angles, the good days, the version of your life that feels most true to you. And in a way, it is true. Just selectively true. But here's the paradox. This little self-enhancement makes you more forgiving toward yourself. And that's necessary. If you saw yourself with perfect, unforgiving clarity all the time, you might freeze under the weight of it. A little denial is a kindness your brain gives you. And it's not just you. Everyone you know is doing it. Even the people who seem brutally honest are still crafting a narrative, still arranging the pieces to look just a little better than the raw messiness of being human. So maybe the trick isn't to strip away all the edits. Maybe it's just to remember that they're there, to hold your story lightly, knowing it's not the whole picture. As you rest here, feel how your own life story flickers softly in your mind. Some parts clear, some blurred, all stitched into something that feels comforting enough to call true. And as that story gently fades into the background, another lie waits. The way something starts feeling true simply because you've heard it enough times, even if it never was. You're floating even deeper now, and the next lie is so quiet it feels harmless. It's the trick of familiarity. When something keeps showing up, an idea, a phrase, a face, it starts to feel true, even if it isn't. Your brain mistakes repetition for reality. The more you hear it, the more it sinks in. You felt this before. A song you didn't like at first grows on you after the 10th listen. A brand you see on billboards everywhere suddenly feels reliable. Or someone you meet repeatedly starts feeling trustworthy simply because they're familiar. You call it comfort. But your brain is just equating seen often with safe. Mainstream psychology calls this the illusory truth effect. In experiments, people were shown random statements, some true, some false. The false ones, when repeated, started to feel true. It didn't matter how absurd. The brain just got lazy. I've heard this before, so it must be real. Want a quirky tidbit? In one study, people were told explicitly that a statement was false, like, "The Great Wall of China is visible from space." Weeks later, when asked again, they remembered the statement, but forgot the warning. They said it was true. Familiarity drowned out the correction. And scientists still argue whether this is a flaw or a feature. Maybe, in ancient times, repeating something was how a tribe reinforced useful knowledge. If you kept hearing it, it was probably important. But now, in a world of endless information, repetition doesn't equal truth. It just feels like it. Think about advertising. That jingle you can't get out of your head. That logo you recognize instantly. It's not better than the others. It's just everywhere. Or politics. Slogans and phrases repeated so often they feel self-evident. Familiarity slides past your defenses. It happens in your personal life too. Someone tells you a rumor. You shrug it off at first, but you hear it again from someone else, and again in passing. And suddenly, it feels believable. You forget where it started. You forget to question it. Even your self-perception is shaped this way. If someone keeps calling you the smart one, or the funny one, or the difficult one, you start to inhabit that role. Words repeated become identity. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to echo long enough. Here's a fringe detail that feels almost poetic. Familiarity even shapes your sense of beauty. Show people a random pattern repeatedly, and they start to find it more attractive. The brain relaxes into what it recognizes. Strangeness feels threatening. Familiarity feels safe. And it can soothe you in good ways. a childhood lullaby, a familiar scent, the comfort of a routine. Those repeated things build a sense of stability in a world that's otherwise unpredictable. But it also makes you vulnerable. It's why fake news spreads, why myths persist, why a lie told often enough feels like a fact. Even if part of you knows better, the constant exposure wears down the edge of skepticism. Want to test it on yourself? Tomorrow, notice how many things you believe simply because they've always been said. Phrases like, breakfast is the most important meal, or you only use 10% of your brain, or goldfish have 3-second memories. All repeated so often they feel solid, even though they're false or oversimplified. And it's not just words, it's places, people, routines. The cafe you always go to feels better than a new one, even if the coffee's the same. The neighbor you always see walking their dog feels trustworthy just because they're a familiar shape on the street. It even shapes time. Think about how a place you visit often starts feeling smaller, less mysterious. The edges of novelty smooth out until all that's left is comfort. But here's the twist. Sometimes the familiarity itself becomes invisible. You don't even notice it's affecting you. You think you're making a fresh judgment, when really you're just leaning on what feels familiar. And maybe that's not all bad. Familiarity builds connection. It makes a house feel like home. It makes strangers into friends. It teaches your brain what's safe, what's known. Without it, everything would feel alien and exhausting. But it's still a lie in its way. Because feeling true isn't the same as being true. You can be lulled into believing something simply because it's been around long enough to seem harmless. So as you lie here now, let yourself feel the soft comfort of repetition, the rhythm of your breath, the hum of this quiet space. Familiarity itself can be soothing. But just beyond this comfort lies the final lie, the one where your brain convinces you that the story is complete, that you've reached the full truth, when really, it's only a pause in an endless search. You're gliding into the deepest stretch now, where the last lie feels the gentlest, yet is the most seductive. It's the illusion of finality, the comforting sense that you've arrived at the whole truth, that your understanding is solid, complete, and done. Your brain craves closure. It wants the puzzle to click into place. It doesn't like loose threads dangling in the dark. You felt this before. You read an article, hear a convincing explanation, and think, now I get it. You stop searching. You stop questioning. It feels finished. But that feeling of finished is often just your mind giving itself permission to rest, not actual completion. Mainstream psychology calls this the closure effect. It's a mental shortcut that gives you relief from uncertainty. When the story feels wrapped up, your brain rewards you with calm. That's why cliffhangers are uncomfortable. That's why unfinished conversations haunt you at night. You want the circle closed. Want a quirky tidbit? In studies, people remember incomplete tasks more vividly than completed ones, a phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect. But here's the twist. Once you believe something is resolved, even falsely, your brain lets it fade. The truth doesn't have to be real. It just has to feel like an ending. And scientists still argue whether this desire for closure is purely emotional or also neurological. Maybe it's a survival mechanism. Too much open-endedness would paralyze you. But it also freezes your curiosity. You settle for the neat version instead of digging deeper. You see it everywhere. You watch a documentary, and it ends with a simple moral. Got it, you think, without realizing the real story was more tangled. Or you meet someone and decide, I know who they are, not seeing the infinite layers you haven't touched. It even shapes your identity. You tell yourself, I'm this kind of person, but that's just today's version of you. Tomorrow could shift it. Yet your brain likes to feel fixed, an I am, instead of an I'm still becoming. Think about how history is taught. A few clean dates, a narrative with heroes and villains. It feels complete. But history isn't clean. It's sprawling, contradictory, alive. The neat version is just a placeholder your mind can carry without breaking. Or consider the way you explain your life. You say, it all happened for a reason, or this is where it was always leading. Maybe that's true. Or maybe it's your brain retrofitting meaning onto a messy series of accidents. It feels better to think the story had an arc. Here's a fringe detail that feels hauntingly true. Even science, the most rigorous search for truth, is never really final. Every law is a best guess until a better one replaces it. Newton's physics gave way to Einstein's. Einstein's might give way to something else. But when you learn one version, it feels solid, like the last word, until it isn't. And this illusion of finality creeps into small, personal moments. You feel hurt by someone and decide, that's who they are, not realizing they might change. Or you solve a minor problem and assume it's gone for good, only to watch it resurface in a new shape. Even in relationships, you crave clean conclusions. A breakup, a reconciliation, a definitive label. But people are rarely that simple. They're open-ended stories pretending to be closed books. Want another curious tidbit? When people are shown ambiguous images, like a blurry shape that could be two things, they're more satisfied once they choose one interpretation, even if they know it could be wrong. Certainty feels safer than ambiguity. But here's the secret softness in this lie. Without some illusion of finality, you'd never feel at peace. You need moments where your mind says, it's enough for now. Rest. Even if the bigger picture keeps unfolding quietly beyond your view. So maybe it's not about shattering the lie completely. Maybe it's about knowing that final is never truly final. It's a bookmark, not the last page. The story continues, even when you stop reading for a while. And as you lie here now, breathing slow, you can feel that quiet pause. Not a hard ending, just a soft landing for tonight. Because even this whole journey through your brain's little deceptions isn't really over. It's just a lull, a whisper before the next wave of thought tomorrow. Let yourself sink into that pause. Not final, not perfect, just enough. Now the edges of this story blur, and we wind it down. And so, as your breath settles into a slower rhythm, you can let these little lies fade into the background. The spotlight narrows, the memories soften, the certainty dissolves. Patterns flicker and drift apart like dust. You're left with nothing heavy, just the gentle knowledge that your mind, with all its shortcuts and illusions, is doing its best to keep you afloat. And that's enough. So ease your thoughts into silence. Let the day melt behind you. Feel the soft weight of rest settling in, like a blanket stitched from all the small truths and small fictions that make you human. There's nothing more to figure out tonight. Just the quiet hum of being here, now, safe. Sleep well.